All right. I have a list of questions, but this is one that was not on my list, and this comes from just some of the comments that Matt made. And I really commend you for like, I think there's this whole continuum of tillage. And I really appreciate you like sort of describing like that far extreme of the Bisquick,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like a lot of small diversified farmers we're just so far from that as a starting place. And actually, one of the mentors I had early on did a lot of reduced tillage work in Oregon, and then he did a good job of explaining that too. That in the big scheme of things, a lot of smaller farms are probably way on the low till. So I think we're trying to like push the margins a little bit here, but it's still it's good stuff and it's cool. So um, don't be ashamed of your spader. And I agree with everything.
I'm
you
not ashamed of
I
it.
agree with everything you said about the spader. It is like it is main, that slower speed. You've got the aggregates in there. There's a huge continuum.
Yeah, there is.
So appreciate that. Does anybody have a question for the group right off the bat? Yes, go ahead, Ali.
I think it's all just site dependent, like everybody's got different soil, different pests, and yeah, like, for us, it made more sense to kind of get rid of that dogma of like we can't till the soil because it wasn't actually like beneficial. We were seeing a buildup of things that weren't helping us. So yeah, it's like all a balance and trying to find that sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I was immediately thinking about like we really battled with some phylans quite a bit and made it through the other side without tillage and had an opportunity to speak with Elizabeth from Singing Frogs Farm in California. She was one of the first no-till farmers in California. And, she was a mentor for me early on. And she's who I called when we got hit hard with some phylans. It was like, other than the heat dome, it's the only time that I was like, I don't think I can do this. And we just had thousands upon thousands upon thousands of plants just planted and then died. For those of you who don't know it, does everybody know what symphylans are? So symphylans are a microarthropod that live in the soil, and they eat little baby plant roots. So young transplants are the most susceptible. Some crops are more susceptible than others. And the university guidelines are to just till and add as little organic matter as possible. I'm a naughty farmer and I question everything and like try to not do those things because I'm trying to pave a different way and really question like, well, where did that come from? And like, what's the validity? And like, how long was that study done for? So I did the opposite. And I didn't till, and we added more organic matter. And it took time. And, as an ecologist, like as a soil ecologist, like I'm constantly like, how do we rebuild these ecological relationships in the soil? And it takes time. And not every farmer has that time. And like, I really dedicated time to it. And when Elizabeth called me just last year and she was like, NRCS is asking about our symphylan pressure, I immediately thought of you, like, whatever happened with that? I was like, yeah, we got through the other side. And the reason is because, and we both agreed with this hypothesis, is that we have such stellar biology in the soil. We have these beetles, we have rove beetles, we have like all these predators within the soil that are alive and well because we haven't tilled, that those are predating on the so-called pest. So we still have symphylans. Doesn't mean that we don't have symphylans. It's just that that system is now balanced out. And we have this push-pull. We have, we have enough predation that it doesn't cause us any problems. So when I see them, I'm like, okay, hey, what's up? It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, so it's just two different systems, and it's not one that's better or worse.
What were the online questions?
So yes, we have two pieces of property that are two separate spots, and the one I talked about and showed you today is high and dry, from river flooding. I mean, we have ditch flooding and whatnot, but overall it's fine. My home farm where I grew up and where I first started the farm, has 60 acres in the floodplain, and it's deep in the floodplain. It was 15 feet deep in there last winter. But our farm is at a level where that farm is at a place where there's a breakover bank. It's an extinct S bend of the river, at Elbow Lake, and so we're on a break. The farm, greenhouses, all that are houses are on a break far above it, and then 15 feet below is all the planting fields and whatnot. So you sit on this edge, and that's why a lot of those pictures look like I'm elevated, like I have a drone, because I'm just on my front porch, just looking out at the lower field. But that lower field, the river came right up to my doorstep. So we were fine, but just prepared, ready to move the animals, ready to move everything if we have to.
How does that water affect your soil?
I would say, well, it makes it just so waterlogged. It really makes a big challenge for the rest of the year. After that, we're going to have just big lakes throughout the fields. And so cover crop growth is going to be extremely stunted in those low areas, which leads to, from a weed pressure, it leads to lots of dandelions and lots of weeds in those areas, because the cover crops just basically either perish or they just don't really grow well. So we have a lot of weed pressure in those areas. In those areas, we have to go out and figure out what to do and spread cover crops early on. But no, we're pretty lucky. We're ready for it. We're able to help our neighbors.
So with like the popularity of like online platforms and influencers where everybody is sharing the newest idea and they're just parroting the same information over and over again, are there ideas out there that you guys have seen or tried that just tried it, but no, this does not work?
That's a good question.
Crimping,
We're crimping. We're all crimping.
at least in our region.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that I really see a lot is that there's such a desire for this like one size fits all soil health solution, and it doesn't exist. And I think that, part of my job, I feel like these days as an educator, is just like it's context. Like I don't think there is a book or a publication that is going to fit everybody in this room. So I think that there's like, I feel like there are a million brilliant ideas out there, and that could be a brilliant idea and work really well for that person under that context. But for the rest of us, like, not so much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I forgot to ask you to repeat the question. So the question was, there's a lot of ideas out there in social media and influencers, and what ideas have you seen that absolutely don't work or haven't worked for you?
About you guys.
I don't know. I'm struggling to think of a specific example. You got anything there?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things that do and don't work, like you said, site dependent or even personal dependent. I mean, I think there's some people that, that really, will hurt themselves in order to like do it the most ecological way, to the point where if you don't pay attention to your own mental health there, you won't be doing it very long either. And so it's like you have to also be in tune with yourself and what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and what works, like you said, your location, what doesn't work for your location. I don't know. I don't like. I like to remove as much plastic out of agriculture as possible. So I mean, that's why that was the first thing that then made me wonder what else I could throw away from the JM method. And I was like, for years I've been like, I don't like tarps. I don't like them. I don't like moving them. The disgusting smell. Like
Anaerobic.
we've all talked about it. Like when you're pulling tarps for a long period of times, your hands, your joints hurt so much. It almost makes me feel like, I mean, it's just, I see the value in it, but I see there's other ways that you could do better, to be honest with you. So I don't know. I can't think of a good one off the top of my head, but I agree. I mean, I think like you said, site dependent.
I've got kind of a follow-up or related question maybe. So what do you like, what is your opinion on the, the concept of regenerative, or like, maybe where organic isn't going far enough, or have you looked into regenerative certification, or is there any, like, do you feel that your farm is regenerative, or what's your take on that?
Answer first.
I'll do it.
Yeah. Go for it.
So the question is, what is our take?
Oh, I'm mic'd. I think they got the
I think I
coverage.
did. Yeah.
Right?
Just want to
Yeah.
make sure now.
Yeah.
Regenerative. Well, there's a lot there. I mean, I feel like in today's organic agriculture as a whole, that is one of the biggest debates that we have right now is what is organic? What is regenerative? What do they mean? Because they mean different to so many people. I mean, when I started this, I was looking at it like, okay, regenerative is like, I was like, I'm not going to be organic because of the hydroponic thing, when that started, 5 years ago, when it was like, oh, we're going to make hydroponics organic and it's going to be retroactive. I know there's a lot of people that set them off. Like why, when NOP did that. And there was a big organic regenerative push from there on. I think it's all on a scale, like you talked about earlier, though, Doug. Like regenerative can be organic can be regenerative. It's kind of in the eye of the beholder, but I look at it as I felt like regenerative is soil health related at a much deeper level. Like, conventional, they're feeding the plant, and organic, they say they're feeding the soil. And maybe in regenerative, we're feeding the entire ecosystem, including the farmer and the workers. And is the best way I can look at the whole thing. But then we get into the weeds of all the different idiosyncrasies of all these different systems and how they work. If you look at Rodale's, regenerative ROC, I appreciate and agree with a lot of that. I don't know if I can economically get to every single one of those pieces, though, is the reality of it. I mean, but that is one of our goals, is to get ROC, certified. But I don't know what all that extra work would get us, other than a gold star.
Alan or Jenny?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a very loaded question, of course. Everybody has different opinion about this, but yeah, I think it's very soil health related for me too. And just I think it's regenerative if things are improving over time, and if I see a lot of organic farms that I know that at year 10, things start going downhill a lot. So I think, if your practices are improving the soil health, improving, like Matt said, like also the owners, the workers, you want to make sure that your business is sustainable in those ways. And that also has to do with regenerative, I think. But yeah, if your soil is improving, if your farm is improving from year to year, that seems like pretty regenerative to me.
I agree with that. Yeah, loaded question. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I stay away from that descriptor for my farm. I love the idea of regenerative and the descriptions y'all used. I feel like it's become so incredibly greenwashed that it's not something that I feel good about putting my name under. We've always, from day one, we've always just been ecologically grown, because we're looking at stewarding an entire ecosystem. And that feels regenerative. Like, are we regenerative? Have we improved? Like, heck yes. But yeah, I won't use that word. Yeah. It's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
I'm not an expert, but to me, these terms organic and regenerative have distinct meanings from what I've observed in the practitioners who claim to espouse them. Organic, I think, could be thought of as an exclusionary thing. We're excluding pesticides and other petroleum-based products and chemical farming, more or less, and striving to move towards natural systems, right? Natural soil fertility programs, using your compost and your other organic amendments and so on. And it seems very general and it seems very broad, and that I think is by intent. Now, when I hear regenerative people, and Doug, correct me if I'm mistaken here, I see them with microscopes looking at specific species of microorganisms, and they're trying to reproduce a whole ecosystem microorganism across the spectrum. And the ones that are really doing it well are advocating like full spectrum compost solutions that give you the digesters, all of these other the fungal and the bacterial balances and all of this, and they're being precise and specific with data analysis to do it. And they're saying that by regenerating the biology in the soil, they're seeing things come out of the soil that you can't necessarily access if you're 3 stages back in the succession of the soil and so to me, that's a step that's different from the traditional Rodale organic conversation. I think that adds a whole nother layer that may be controversial, but I think it sounds very promising, and that's what I'm curious about myself. I haven't gone that step. I haven't gotten the compost extractor and made the compost, paid $4,000 for a cubic yard of high-end compost to make my compost extract from, which I see some farmers in Eastern Washington are doing with great success, with incredible yields and high quality product. So to me, I see something very specific and regenerative, and maybe you can speak to that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of claims still. I don't know. I mean, yes, there's people looking under microscopes and like examining, the compost teas and what they're doing, but there's not a lot of, kind of scientific rigor, I don't think applied to that, and that would sort of bear out that, those practices are completely changing the soil food web or anything like that. So in my experience, I see, I do think the focus where there's focus on reducing disturbance, we do see, disturbance has a huge effect on the soil food web. And, I've seen that data, and I've seen sort of, I don't know, I guess I haven't really seen the data that backs up a lot of the claims about some of the other additives or biological additives and things like that. So
sorry, is there no research out there about the differences between fungal and bacterial balance and the effect on certain crops and so on?
There's a lot of research out there. I mean, I'm not sure to that point exactly. I mean, I can't like cite something right off the bat for you on that, but yeah, I mean, there is a lot of research into compost teas, for example. And a lot of it can show like really high, the research is done, maybe it's done in a greenhouse and it shows really high effectiveness, but then when it's taken to the field, there's less effectiveness. So I think like there is a lot of research that doesn't necessarily back up some of the claims that people are making. So I think that's one thing to be wary about. So yeah, there's room for a lot more. I mean, one thing I think there's like organic doesn't necessarily require that you demonstrate a change in soil health. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong from that. But it does say that, they do require you to do certain practices. And so I think that, if regenerative is aspiring to show that there are improvements, then I think that's good. But I don't know that we are able to really document that. I mean, one question I had for you is, have you paid for any soil health testing, and has it been helpful? Or or even soil fertility testing? And have you incorporated that into your management decisions, either one or both, soil fertility testing or soil health, something beyond that, maybe like a more biological based or
Yes, 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 yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I utilize all of those tools. We do chemical analysis for all of our macro and micronutrients. I do 2 different biological tests. I'll do a Haney test. I'm just really curious about soil respiration and how active is my soil. So that one I'll do annually. And then I do a PLFA test, which is a phospholipid fatty acid test. And that does help me better understand kind of where my fungal to bacterial ratio is. Do I have soil predators in my soil? So it will tell me what the like if I have those predators, the amoebae and the protozoa count. So that is helpful, and that's one that I just take every 3 years, and that's what's recommended. Like, so I just want to know, like, I want to see improvement. That's kind of what we're talking about in terms of regenerative. Like, am I seeing improvement? And then I do a tissue analysis to round it all off. I'm not a huge fan of soil tests. Personally, I feel like it's just what's potentially available, and not necessarily what your plants are getting in. So I'll do multiple tissue analysis as well to just try to get a sense of what my plants are actually taking up and what they aren't taking up. And then I'll supplement with a foliar trace mineral spray. I have a little fish in there, just to ensure that my plants have what they need. But that's just how I love, I like to geek out on data. So we've been at it for a while. So it's cool to look and see what's happening. And if I start to see a drop in respiration or a drop in something, it's like I can start to ask what's changed in my management that has caused this, either positive or negative.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, we don't do nearly as much. We soil test once a year, but like Jen was saying, I'm always very skeptical about the soil tests, like what they say and everything. But we try to get a deeper analysis of all what micronutrients are deficient and stuff, and it is very helpful. But yeah, it is just this one little snapshot in time, and I don't know if it's always. I feel very skeptical that it's representative of the whole year. Yeah, I'm kind of I feel very kind of stuck with soil testing right now. Not really sure what to do, but yeah, it's something that we continue to do though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we soil test yearly, but I mean, like you both said, it's a snapshot.
Yeah.
I use it to look at what I need to get for fertility, but understanding that it's probably not the whole, it's not the whole, it's not the whole piece, it's not the whole puzzle there. But we look at that to get our to get our micros and
the micronutrients
and see if there's anything else that I can add to it or whatnot. But
Let me repeat the question. So the question is, what makes you skeptical of soil tests, and what information do you wish the soil test would give you? Yeah, what's missing?
I don't know. For me, it's always it says that we're deficient in something, but I don't or it says we have. More often, it's actually it says we have plenty of something like phosphorus, say, or something, but I don't see that. I see when we don't put down enough chicken manure or whatever that has phosphorus in it, that we really if I only use feather meal, I really see a difference between the two products. And I think that's a phosphate thing. But the soil test says that it's good, doesn't need it. But is that available? I don't know, so I'm not super nerdy about all of this, but it's just I feel like we test the soil and then we end up doing kind of the same thing again, and I was like, was that even worth it to spend all that money on that soil test? But yeah, and our soil is so sandy that we need to put down a lot of the micronutrients every year. So it kind of feels like we're just trying to maintain, a level by constantly adding more micronutrients yearly, to get that level good. Because if I don't, it's just going to go down really quickly. So I guess I more just question like the value of it. If it over years, it just looks like it's, you know, things are good, but I just need to keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a snapshot. It feels like it's like, is it going to be correct in 3 months? You know, if I'm looking at a fertility program in July and I took my soil test in April, is that does that equal the same thing then? And I feel like to really and I don't feel it gives you enough information. You know, it gives you your main things, but I feel like if I was really going to need to know the ins and outs of it and have a lot of faith in it, I would probably need to be a lot more on the line of where Jen's at and doing multiple different tests and having a deeper ecological background on that regard, and something I've actually looked at going back and getting more education in that. So I feel I could have more knowledge of that. Because yeah, it just feels like there's something missing with the test when you like you said, it doesn't you're not deficient in something, but then you see that you're not getting uptake. So what else am I missing?
I really encourage, like, I think that soil testing, you know, as much as I feel really frustrated by it, and I also do it, and I'm really an advocate of it, and just like, how do you take the most noise out of a clunky test, because it does vary. It's just a snapshot. It's going to change according to just even your lab. I've sent the same soil to 2 different labs, and I've gotten 2 totally different results.
Yeah.
And that scares the
Yeah, that happened to us too.
out of me. And it's like, how do you feel confident about making recommendations off of something like that? You know, I'm a huge advocate for a leaf tissue analysis. I've gotten a soil test back and it's like, your calcium is spot on perfect. I've done a leaf tissue analysis and it's like, you have no calcium in your leaf at all. And so I think that it's a tool. And just like all of this it's tools. So the more tools we use, the better. That we, you know, question and be curious and be skeptical all at the same time, and just know, like, it's all these pieces to this giant. I think of soil and like, how do we look at this? It's like one of those 1,000-piece puzzles that doesn't have a picture on it. It's just black. It's like, that's kind of how I feel like we're moving, and we're like, just, you know, I'm like, I'm stoked if I can, you know, I think of soil testing as like, here's my 4 corners, sweet. And like, now I have all this other stuff to have to fill in. And it's gonna really vary. It's so much fun. I love it.
Great analogy.
Yeah, that's great.
Stephen, you had a
great answer.
You should see a tissue test of the parts somewhere in soil. I'm glad you get the calcium. The two-part question of that is that you see that in the other nutrients that are diverging in the 2 samples, and then second, you test a certain vegetable in the system. You're like, how do you do?
The question is just about tissue testing and how it relates with soil testing.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated. I mean, the book that I have on tissue analysis is like 600 pages. And it varies, like, when you sample, what part of the plant you sample, at what time do you sample, is going to have a huge indicators and impact on what nutrients are there and at what levels they should be at. So honestly, from what I understand, like, I'm not claiming to be an expert at all. Like, I just feel like I'm still at my beginning of really trying to figure out how to get more comprehensive information, so I feel confident going forward. But yeah, so yeah, same crop. Like, I really try to be careful about what I'm testing and when I'm testing, and making sure that there are you know, recommendations for that particular crop at that stage. And the data just is still pretty incomplete. So if you are looking to leaf tissue test, like, make sure that there are results and recommendations for what are ranges, I should say. Make sure there are ranges that are available. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money. But thankfully, tissue tests are relatively inexpensive. I think they run like, I don't know, $30 a pop, something like that. It's not that bad. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, back here first. We'll get to you.
dome, how that affects your soil, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit on what you saw happen, impacts the 3 years comes back, and then just like tying into this whole idea of this conference to soil health, like how can we plan for these kind of heat events going forward? How can we tie in things like cover cropping and keeping residue on the field like we saw earlier? It was so much cooler.
It's crazy, right?
Double than it was compared to soil. So, like, I don't know. I don't know if it's a specific question, but just like maybe if you could speak to how you envision dealing with heat events on your farm when it comes to the health.
Can you?
Yeah, I'm happy to repeat. Okay, so
Thanks, Jen.
yeah, of course. So I'm hearing this as a multi-part question. Started with, what were the impacts on our farm in terms of the heat dome? It took a few years for me to or a couple of years, I should say, to kind of figure out. So what did that look like? And then in terms of this conference, we're all here in this room together, all these great minds, right? Which is what we need to do this work. How are we looking at soil health in terms of climate resilience? Does that summarize? Heat events specifically. Yeah. Keep your soil covered. So the heat dome question, yeah, so I think the big thing that I really saw on our soil was our soil became so incredibly hydrophobic. So what that looked like for me was that I would we were using drip at the time. I would run drip in the morning, and by like 2 or 3 p.m., the soil, it was so bone dry. I was like, what is happening? I just felt like we could not put enough water on. It was just repelling. And this is what I heard that specialist who worked on fire restoration for soil was that essentially the bacteria, we have a biologist in the house, right? Yes.
Several.
Yeah, so let me know. I'm several. Okay, sorry about that. Recognize. How I understand it is that bacteria will protect themselves by excreting some type of bacterial compound, and that bacterial compound releases over the soil aggregate, and that compound is hydrophobic. Does anybody want to back me up on that? That's how I understand what happens in a fire situation. So the heat dome was like late June. We had a lot of soil covered, and yet we're up at like almost 1,000 feet elevation. So plants were still relatively small. And I would say that we probably had more soil exposed than I would have liked. And, to answer your question about like, how do you work through that? Like, it's something that I work on all the time. You saw I'm so excited about cover crops and just like try to have soil covered as much as possible. I've gone out with a thermometer and tested where there's plant coverage and where it's bare, and it's frightening how much hotter bare soil gets. So I think that's a big piece, and the biology in the soil really helps our plants mitigate climate extremes, both hot and cold. So making sure that we're fostering good soil biology.
Oh wait, we had one.
With the other.
Oh, the other. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The heat dome was crazy. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, keeping things I mean, obviously, like being in June was tricky. I think that was the weirdest part about that. Like the day length was so long that I remember that 118-degree day. Yeah, it was crazy. But I mean, our farm, I think our scale kind of helped a lot because, like I talked about earlier, we have like permanent irrigation set up in the whole farm. So I was just running like 15-minute cycles on rotation over and over again, the entire farm, trying to keep everything moist, and cooling down as much as I could. But that's pretty much all I had for that. I mean, just, yeah, trying, it's not much you can do like when you're in that moment. Like it's in terms of like, obviously like planning for the future, making, it's another reason to double down on keeping your soil covered, having cover crops or just not having bare fallow soil.
Yeah, design your systems around what you see, thinking about that time frame. Like, okay, June, July, August, there's a much better chance I'm going to get these. So if I have to get soil prepped, beds prepped, do it just, start as early as you can, as late as you can, and try to figure out, a way to do it with less time. I mean, yeah, that was a really tough situation. I mean, like you said, like water, just
Water,
how,
yeah.
we just had overhead going the
Nonstop.
entire time and never turned off.
Hmm.
But we have a well, so we were able to, it's power bill, but yeah, with that reality, we're just water, 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 water. It just didn't stop. But yeah, cover crops, build your systems around that plan and be like, this is going to be in my future. Build it now, and maybe it won't happen for 10 years, but in 10 years you'll be really happy.
So I am in my first year of farming and getting going and scrambling and don't know what I'm doing and trying to do things as best as I can. My first realization about no-till or use till is I don't like running the rototiller. And it was hard on me physically. So and I'm on a very small scale, about quarter of an acre. So getting things set up so I don't have to till, at least with a major issue, in the future, to me would be huge benefit. And I loved your analogy of the 1,000-piece puzzle, and we've got a couple of like the corners in place. What's the next pieces that you would recommend to someone to start putting in place? Okay, I got the basic concepts. I mean, you've all had so many great ideas, but the next step, early on, what suggestions do you have?
I'll try to sum that up real quick. So,
Yeah, I got it. So that, yeah.
so getting the basics in place, and then what is kind of the next in terms of soil health management, and yeah, and also a distaste for rototilling.
Yeah.
And then what's next? You're gonna dive a little bit deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like my recommendation is always take it slow, not rush. I mean, I think that's the mistake most people make is like thinking that your farm is going to be something year one, but it's not, it's going to be a challenge. And uh, like making sure that you're doing the right things to build, like, the whole thing should be in cover crop to start, for a while. Like it should be, it shouldn't be like rushing right into production if, you want to be doing this long term or putting a lot of compost down or something. But definitely like prioritizing the soil building stuff at the very beginning. And then like layout too, for me is big. Like you want to make sure you're laying out your production area how you want it to be long term. I mean, I've definitely made the mistake of it just sucks having to redo it all after a few years. So yeah, just not rushing too much is my big recommendation.
Yep. Give yourself time on that. And immediately start looking for your outlets and channels and starting to build those relationships, because I mean, you can do all this work here and really focus on building your soil and building your farm and doing that. But if you don't have a place to sell the food, well, I mean, it's great to give it away, but at the end of the day, if we're doing this to be able to pay back the money for all the inputs and all the cost of goods, you need to start immediately looking, where am I going to sell it? I mean, it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to go make a deal with you, like, get a contract, but start like creating those relationships and like opening those doors, and go look at the food bank, other institutions like that. A lot of times there's programs, or potentially there used to be definitely programs to help someone like yourself to buy the food from you, and just start looking around, look at your extension, and see, and just start looking in those directions. But yeah, start slow. Don't start slow, build soil, cover crops. Don't just go out and throw like 500, broccoli seeds in the ground and see what happens. Like, what do I do now? No, build your soil, build your business, build the foundation before you build the house.
I think a big thing for us, sorry, too, is just that like the tarp. This is a good use for like the tarps is the beginning, like I think that's how we've strategically added space, is like when we're adding into our new production zones, we're not like plowing that new zone. We're putting a tarp on for 12 months. And it's like killing all of the grasses, killing all of the weeds, the rhizomes, that are going to come back, and just making sure that when we're starting to grow in this space, it's like ready for that. or you can just take it all out by hand. And, yeah, you can just take it.
Ask yourself, what's your lowest hanging fruit? Is it, how well are your nutrients balanced in your soil? Like, is calcium really low? Everybody's talking about nitrogen. I don't hear enough people talking about the importance of calcium in the soil. It's such an important driver of the system for your microbiology, for your plants. If you can borrow or purchase a penetrometer from tool library and understand where your compaction is. I've seen some very well-intentioned no-till soil loving farmers really struggle because they were trying to farm on a 6-inch plow pan and they just didn't know, or they were really dogmatic about I don't want to plow, or I don't want to till. But that's going to make your journey a little bit more challenging. So that's what I mean by like address those low hanging fruits first and really get yourself set up for success.
Mark?
Yeah, I wondered if anybody's got experience with like a summertime cover crop that they don't irrigate. That's what I'd be careful.
You and everyone else.
Maybe not the irrigation part, but
Sudan grass. No?
I don't.
I've had great luck with Sudan grass planted July 1st.
Yep.
Not irrigated.
Oh, no.
And sometimes, I mean, depending on the weather, I guess maybe some pre-irrigation. I love pre-irrigation with cover crops. So you can kind of irrigate the soil and then maybe do like a weed strike and then plant, and then that water's in there. You do get more yield with irrigation, but you also get more weeds. So we've done pretty good with Sudan grass.
I agree with that. We've had good luck with it. If you get buckwheat in early enough, you could, like, this is a good year to get buckwheat in early. It was a warm May. So if you hit it with the, I mean, because you're not going to get it as good, but it's only a 2-month crop anyways. And so that we've had good luck with. If you hit it right.
We had a question back here. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have issues? Is that like a regular thing or December?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question was, in my low ground that's near the bank, near the Skagit River in the floodplain, if we have a, let's see, I'm sorry, if we're doing any kind of cover cropping in that zone, and I'm sorry, what was.
I think that in the low ground,
Yeah,
right?
low ground.
Are you talking about like flooding over winter
It
flooding?
was the flooding.
Is that
Yeah,
what happened in
sure.
December? Is that normal?
Yeah. It gets regularly flooded, but not. We get small washes through there, and it won't flood the entire field. But there's about a 4-foot difference in there. So if the water gets to a point where they're talking about it on the news, oh, the Skagit River is going to flood, there might be a little bit of water in that low field, and then it'll probably stay in those low sections for the rest of the year. It's that field is it's really shaped like a triangle, and the river comes in, or it used to come in, the old S bank comes in and comes around, and there's multiple sections of that where like the field has these undulations where you could see the river was once at 5,000, 10,000 years ago. And so you'll get these like elbow-shaped lakes through it, like these striations of it, and they'll stay there the rest of the winter. But the water doesn't all stay there. But that's why we really cover crop heavily down there. And it's October 1, we're planting cover crops, and everything's coming out of that field. Decent. It depends on what it is. The clover does really well, and the rye does pretty well too. The Austrian winter peas don't. They really drowned. They're a little bit more fickle. But the very lowest sections are the one that might hold water for 4 months. Yeah, it completely kills everything in those, and then the dandelions are the first to come back, of course, and a bunch of other weeds. But for the most part, no, we just keep that and really heavy cover crop, and we've seen an incredible improvement in that soil. Before I started farming there, it was being, I like to say, it was being mined by a rancher who was just bailing it for probably 15 years and not ever feeding it. So it was really low organic matter, just really hard pan clay, but it's gotten substantially better just being in a 5-year cover crop, 6-year cover crop, really.
Are you buying all your cover crop seed, or like how does that fit into your budget? Is it probably like
Well, that's why I don't get onto all these fancy spendy seeds. There's a lot of rye and it's a lot of clover.
yeah.
And then Sudan and buckwheat for special sections. We're really lucky in Skagit that we have Skagit Farmer Supply, and we have a real agronomy center that they'll deliver a buggy of seed to me that has 5 tons of seed in it or 5 tons of fertilizer, and it's a spreading buggy.
Wow.
Yeah, they're spread, but it's amazing. Yeah, I can just go pick up a spread buggy, and I can go out and we get it all set up and spread it and take it back to them. But it's not cheap, no. But I mean, like if you look at your cost per acre of your crops, cover crops not very expensive compared to lots and lots of tillage or lots and lots and lots of cultivation, or just losing crops over and over and over again because of weed pressure. But I have like a multi years. It's not my favorite, but I tried this once where I let the rye go to seed and reseeded the
Right.
field. In one area where the field is that low section, the field had really bad, the lowest spot. So we just let it go. It's like, this is going to be in 3 years of cover crop rotation, and it's okay. I mean, it was a lot cheaper. I mean, I think I would have had better soil. There probably would have been more organic matter returned to the soil if I had every year plowed it up, tilled it up, and then put in sorghum Sudan grass. But I mean, for not doing anything except for watching it's a lot better this year. And mowing patches.
I'm going to ask another question. So are there any additional experiments or trials that you would like to see in organic agriculture, associated with this LTARE, like possibly side experiments or anything that you're like, somebody should research that?
So many things.
Yeah. I would love to see more ways that we can figure out how to interseed with crops and whatnot. And just trials on, I mean, like, well, really tall crops like a kale or a broccoli. I mean, there's ways to do that. But how about I'd love to see interseeding with other crops that are quicker or lower, and seeing if there's any. I mean, I don't know if lettuces. There's one way you can do it, but I sure would love to see it.
Yeah,
and see how we could get plant our cash crop and immediately plant our cover crop, or right after that plant our cover crop, and then we're done.
I don't got anything, I think.
Yeah. My curiosity is really around the different depths and intensity of tillage and cover crops. And so like seeing impact of which I know soil organic matter and carbon is just so difficult to really, I think, to measure well, and with consistency from what I understand. But I'm curious about, like, there's a lot of really good research about the integrity of the carbon that is going into the soil via root exudate, that it's this long, really stable form of carbon. And I'm curious, like the experiment that you're doing with the biofuels, I'm really, like, please keep me posted, because I want to know, like, what is that, that surface extractant, what is the impact? Because you're also putting in a lot of good stuff. So, you know, my question is basically like, I want to know the rate, the balance, the balance of that, of like, you know, root exudates only with maybe just a surface mulch versus I know there's some, at least like some of my, you know, soil nerdy friends, like we're working on cover crops with just a very shallow incorporation just in the top couple of inches to feed biology. And then, you know, into the disc versus the spader, like what is, you know, what are those impacts?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
feel like I'm constantly
The type of carbon and like where does it go and like how are you incorporating it?
Yeah, in the stability of it, which I know that that's the part that maybe that science isn't there yet for us to really be able to consistently measure. I'm curious if y'all have worked with the POC test at all in terms of looking at that carbon piece. And you know, there's the carbon that has the quick burn off, and then there's just like those stable pieces. So I don't know, this is just my brain right now. I want to really understand those. I want to understand our impact and how can we move the soil health needle into a positive direction, and where's the line of where tillage is causing like a negative impact, or you know, what's the gold standard?
Yeah.
I didn't articulate that very well at all, y'all.
that's
So I'm
it.
so sorry.
Well, I mean, one of the things we're trying to do in the LTER is it's not perfect, but kind of a mass balance. So, you know, we are doing different kinds of tillage and then we're planting cover crops. When we do the more tillage, we get more cover crop biomass. So we're trying to keep track of that, if you follow me, right? So like that's more biomass that's going back into that system, even though we tilled it compared to the other system where we didn't till it, but the cover crop biomass is less good because we didn't, for whatever reason, you know, that's kind of what we're working on. So, I mean, that makes the balance, it brings into question.
So the piece I would love to see y'all add to that is the root exudate piece. Is that,
Yeah.
like, how are you measuring that? Because it
It's
isn't
too hard.
because it's just, I know, well, that's what I'm saying. You don't know if the science is really there yet. But I just feel like the tillage piece, like, I don't feel like it's necessarily, I don't feel like it's about the equipment. It's about the oxygen that's being added into the soil that's exciting the microbiology to burn up that carbon very, very quickly. So you may be getting this beautiful amount of biomass, but then when it's tilled in, like, is it negated? Like, that's what I want to know. That's what I want to know.
Sorry, I asked.
No, you got it right again.
Okay, one more question online.
Oh my gosh.
Do I need to repeat that? Okay, so the more you work with your land, does it feel like, well, I'm sorry,
Family. Yeah.
part of your family, or your soil is part of your family or a loved one?
That's a great question. I mean, that's an emphatic, like, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I have areas on my farm that I don't spend a lot of time with. I don't know if y'all do. And then I have areas on my farm, like where I have intensive veg, and I've just actively managed that land and that soil with so much love and intensity. And when I open the gate into that part of the farm, like, there is a feel that's different, and I can't describe it. I don't want to be woo-woo, but like, I feel the difference when I walk into that space versus into my orchard or into my front yard or the back 40 or whatever. I can't describe it.
No, I think it's kind of similar for us too. Like we don't live on our farm, so the farm is this kind of like special spot that we return to every day. And I kind of feel the same way every day going through the gate. It, you know, especially this time of the year when things are changing so quickly, it definitely feels like part of the family. We love it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was born on our farm, and you know, my grandparents were there, you know, farming when I was growing up. And so, yeah, I find it hard to leave sometimes, to be quite honest. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I got to go do this. Oh, I don't really. I mean, like going and doing things with my kids, that's easy. That's family. But I mean, I come into this is, it's not like you don't want to go, but you find you're like, oh, where are we going to go? And a lot of people are like, oh, vacation. We went to Disneyland. We went, did this and did that. Went here, spring break. Oh, we hung out on the farm. We went and hung out on the farm and went, I have a creek that runs through it. So we went and played in the creek and went and, built a bridge and dug holes in the woods. I don't know. But yeah, I agree. There's a very distinct feel. It's like right there. It's like always right there. You just, you've put your heart and soul into it. And I mean, not to be woo, but the land feels that. I mean, I feel like we're like a shepherd, like what is our spot in the garden? And that's where like that one of those, we're part of, not the brain, but we're part of the brain. We're the hands. That's, our brain is being led and told us to do these and these and these things. And, we kind of facilitate a lot of processes on the farm or in a forest setup or whatnot. Humans are, they're the doer, the worker.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.